everybody. Welcome to the show. Around the nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Got a good show for you guys today on this Wednesday, midweek. A lot of stuff about, of course, the immigrant stuff, child separation at the border. We also have a net neutrality story that is not good news. Could have been good news, but not good news. We have that. We've got, like I said, a lot of immigrant stories today, so get ready for that. We also have Joe Crowley running in a primary against, he's actually the incumbent in a primary in New York, who's actually getting challenged by a real progressive, and he's turning to some unorthodox sources for money. We've got that story. It's a great article from the Intercept, Li Fong. I'm going to present that to you guys. We'll talk about that. It's a fascinating story about the quote-unquote resistance. So you're not going to want to miss that story. That's later on today. And, of course, finally, we also do have something on Canada. We're going to talk about our Canadian friends up north and what they just did. That's a good story. I think you'll like it. Okay. Anyway, so great show ahead for you guys today. Before we get into it, I just want to thank everybody for being here, obviously. Also, please give us a like and a share. Also consider using the Super Chat to help the show and to get a hold of the show. Getting a lot of great Super Chats. Actually, one of them is a suggestion to a story that I'm going to do today. Something that was brought to my attention. So I want to thank the person who did that yesterday, not only for supporting the show, but for actually giving me a great idea on something to cover as well, something that's really important. All right. So anyway, let's dive into it. A lot of stuff to go through. So let's just let's dive in. And we'll start out with a nice poll on Trump supporters. Fun. Now, we have a little bit of breaking news. President Trump has decided to walk back his support of separating immigrant families at the border, the zero-tolerance policy. The same one that he said the only Congress and Democrats can fix. He has now come out to say, no, I'll just do an executive order against this policy, Paul Ryan. Now, Steve Schmidt today also said, I am no longer a Republican. But look, that's the thing. We shouldn't be impressed by Republicans at this point saying that this is the line. When you separate families, I mean, that's the line. No, the line was way, way back there. You guys just kind of missed it. But hey, nonetheless, okay. But people in office, however, a lot of people in office, again, Paul Ryan's leaving and Mitch McConnell, look, Mitch McConnell is the most unpopular senator, I think, in the United States, and he continues to win re-election in Kentucky, so it doesn't really matter what he does. He's still going to get reelected. But as far as all the other politicians, well, I've got a few polls that explain why they have stayed silent on this so-called policy from the Trump administration, and for that, I go to Quinnipiac. All right. So, look, they asked the American people, how do you feel about the child separation at the border? Are you in favor of the policy or are you against the policy? Well, unsurprisingly, most Americans consider this policy abhorrent. They're like, no, we don't want to separate families at the border. That's barbaric. 67 to 27% oppose this policy, according to Quinnipiac. Now, Republican voters, though, again, the 66% is generally most of the American public, right? Now, you look at Republicans, Republican voters support the policy 55 to 35. In fact, they're the only group that significantly supports this policy. Now, let's go to another poll. Let's go to CNN. Now, a CNN poll found that the policy is supported among Republicans by 58%. Outside of the GOP, there's actually very little support. 5% of Democrats support it, And 27% of independents also support the policy or approve of the policy. Those are pretty low numbers. And there's another one. There's an Ipsos poll that was done exclusively for the Daily Beast. Let's look at that. Now, the poll of roughly 1,000 adults aged 18 or over, conducted June 14th to 15th, asked respondents if they agreed with the following statement. It is appropriate to separate undocumented immigrant parents from their children when they cross the border in order to discourage others from crossing the border illegally. That's what Jeff Sessions said. That was the whole point of it, according to some people in the administration. And, of course, the administration did not have a coherent message. Donald Trump blamed the Democrats. Jeff Sessions cited the Bible. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I think, also probably cited the Bible, or at least cited the fact that, well, I mean, it was biblical. So they didn't have a coherent message on that. But nonetheless, as far as the voters are concerned, of those surveyed, 27% of the overall respondents agreed with it, while 56% disagreed with the statement. So, again, most of the American public across these three different polls despise this. They do not like this policy. However, Republicans, 46% agreed with the statement and 32% disagreed, while 14% of Democrats supported it and only 29% of independents were in favor. So I guess really what you're seeing is really high levels of Republican support and really low levels of everybody else. So that tells me that for the most part, many, many Republicans love this policy. They love what President Trump was doing. Yes, separate the families, rip them apart. If it means that these immigrants don't come into the country, rip them apart. I hate families. I'm so pro-life. Okay. Now, here's the thing, right? When CNN went and did an interview with a bunch of people, a bunch of Trump supporters, and they asked, look, doesn't any of this bother you? What's going on? I mean, it doesn't the whole policy of ripping families apart, even if you're opposed to immigration, which mostly you are, the least you could do is not separate these families and use them as a deterrent, right? Well, they found out that the real thing that bothers these Republicans is not the policy. It is the fact that they are asked to have empathy for these children. And that's not me saying that. That's actually them saying that. And we have some of that video right here. Let's watch.
These people that we have coming across the border illegally are breaking the rules. Oh, I have no feelings for them at all.
It's not about Mexicans. That's what everybody is so angry about. It's not. I don't care if you're from Canada. I don't care if you're from where. You just can't come into this state and reap. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain.
You think that people are living off of the state but not doing it legally?
Absolutely. And I think it's bull.
Now, when you have a bad guy coming across, kidnapping a kid and trying to come across, I don't buy that.
How many of these do you think could be bad guys?
I don't really know, but there's a lot of people being hurt by bad guys coming into this country. A lot of people.
Quit trying to make us feel teary-eyed for the children. Yes, I love children a great deal. But to me, it's up to the parents to do things rightfully and legally.
You support the president 100%.
Correct.
Quit trying to make me feel teary-eyed. I love the children. Just stop making me trying to feel for the children. And then, of course, there's the widely debunked claim that, oh, they just come over here to get the benefits. Well, let me set that straight. You do not get federal benefits. Now, there are some states that will offer, and it all depends on the states in which you're living, that have passed laws that do offer some sort of help to immigrants. But, nonetheless, she's like, no, all of our money goes to that. And I'm really upset. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Yes, it's bullshit for, I don't know, families that are fleeing war and drug gangs and terrible situations to try to give their kids a better life. Look, many of these families are asylum seekers, right? And they keep saying, well, it's the law, they're breaking the law by crossing the border. Seeking asylum is not a crime. However, caging a child and separating families, that is against, that is a crime against humanity. But look, they don't care. They rationalize it. They justify it. They agree with it. This is your pro-life Republican Party. This is not an aberration. And look, a lot of people are like, oh, Trump, he's taking it too far. Trump's taking it too far. No. Here's the thing. Trump, yes, I do agree that he's taking it way, way too far. But he is not the problem. He is not the disease. He is a symptom. He is the natural progression of the conservative ideology of America. They wanted this. And now they got it. And they are completely happy with it. Make no mistake. Okay. Moving on. Okay. Now, Corey Lewandowski is a very controversial figure. He's done a lot of terrible things. He's assaulted a right-wing reporter, by the way. Not a left-wing reporter, but a right-wing reporter during the campaign of President Trump. So it's not a surprise to hear him saying terrible things. Now, this, of course, this latest thing relates to the discussion on separating immigrant families. Now, during a CNN discussion, Lewandowski had made a very, very insensitive remark about a specific story of a 10-year-old girl being taken from their mother. Now, I'm going to show you that, and then we're going to give you more detail. We'll break it down.
Old girl with Down syndrome who was taken from her mother and put in a cage. I read about did you say want to a 10-year-old with Down syndrome being taken from her mother?
What I said is you can pick anything you want out, but the bottom line is very clear.
How dare you?
When you cross the border illegally.
Womp womp. Oh, well, look at that. That's his response. Oh, yeah, 10-year-old girl who had Down syndrome, separated from her families. Of course, that child right now is lost. Don't know where her family is. Don't know where her parents are because they got separated. And oftentimes, these families end up losing each other and not being able to find each other. Now, according to Lewandowski, says, womp womp. Oh, don't care. This is how they feel. And by the way, here's some more background information from CNN. The girl and her brother were sent to a detention center in McAllen, Texas, and their mother was sent to a facility about an hour away in Brownsville after the family attempted to cross the border. Now, the father is actually a legal resident of the United States. But again, this is how they feel. Oh, you separated from your family? Womp womp. Sad day for you. Look, even if you're against illegal immigration, you can't look at that and say, oh, no, that's a completely legitimate reaction. That seems to be, I guess it seems to indicate that you're missing a little bit of a core of your humanity. Oh, but Jeff, it's the law. They knew they would be separated. And that's another argument I run into a lot. And I always wonder when somebody says that, well, how do you know that? How do you know that they knew? Do you think they're like sitting at home and watching Donald Trump and listening to the news in America that they're like, you know what? Now is the time to cross the border because we know we're going to get separated. No, you don't know that. You don't know that. And look, if they do know that coming into the country, if word got through the grapevine, then they probably ran a good cost-benefit analysis before trying to cross the border. For example, get separated by the authorities or die from gang violence. That's a tough choice. Real tough choice. But look, most of these people are refugees. Now, this 10-year-old girl in question, she was Mexican, but most of them actually are not Mexican. Most of them are from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. These are places racked by gang violence, specifically from the drug cartels. Well, who has helped enable the drug cartels through our war on drugs? That would be the United States. Legalize it already. if we were to legalize marijuana, we could deal a crippling blow to the drug cartels, but of course we refuse to do that. But look, that policy matters a whole lot into creating the situations where these people are trying to run from, right? But see, her ethnicity for the girl doesn't really matter. What matters is empathy. We got to have empathy, and that's the thing. If they're running from a gang, if they're running from violence and death, thanks to our war on drugs, then I think we have some sort of responsibility to deal with that fallout. We don't just operate in a vacuum. For example, when we bomb somewhere, when we bomb someplace like Syria and we make it even more unsafe, then we should have a responsibility in taking care of the people displaced by those bombs. I guarantee if we were to start taking responsibility for the places that we bomb and taking in refugees, well then, we would probably stop bombing so many people. But anyway, now, later on, he walked that back, sort of. Now, he said, quote, "When parents commit crimes by coming into this country, regardless of who their children are, they are separated because we are a nation of laws." Well, again, laws can be changed. Saying that it's the law, what can we do? It's actually not a law. It's not actually a policy that was here before the Trump administration. And I'll explain. He says that this is a policy that is implemented under the Obama administration, and Congress can change this. Turns out, Trump doing an executive order can also change this. Now, he says they have chosen not to do that. Oh, it's the Democrats' fault. It's Obama's fault. That's actually a lie. The Obama administration did not implement this policy. According to the former officials, the Obama administration did not have any kind of widespread practice of separating children from their parents at the border. Most likely, they would just send them home. They would deport them. Look, I've been critical of the Obama administration for deporting more immigrants or more undocumented immigrants than the Bush administration. That is a fact. But as far as separating families, it did happen, but it was actually incredibly rare. Authorities, when it did happen, were concerned that the children were being trafficked. So that's why there were separations, and that happened roughly every 6 months to a year. You would have 1 or 2 cases. The Trump administration has separated nearly 2,000 children from adults from April 19th to May 31st. So that is a lie. Corey Lewandowski, the administration, they're actually lying to everyone to try to deflect from their own racist policy. It is their policy. It is heinous. He continues. "It doesn't matter to me if you come with 1 child or 10 children. Nobody wants to see their parents separated from their children. But the parents understand that by coming to this country illegally, they are committing a crime, and there are consequences just as there would be in any country in the world. So let's not make this about politicizing children. Let's make it about the rules and the law, and Congress has the ability to change that." Again, Congress has attempted to change that. There are Republican bills or Democratic bills. And now, of course, the problem with the GOP legislation, is that it's actually even more draconian than what we have now. Sure, it would end the process of separating families, but it would actually throw the entire family in jail. Great, wonderful fix you have there, Republicans. It would also limit legal immigration. So that is more draconian. That is actually worse. Now, there was a Democratic bill put forward by Dianne Feinstein that basically said, let's just stop separating families. Now, the GOP could have acted on that. Ted Cruz also put out a bill saying essentially the same thing. It was a good piece of legislation. Surprisingly, from Ted Cruz. But no, they weren't interested in that. Kirstjen Nielsen, DHS, she was working on a policy change to say we should stop separating children from their parents. Trump, he wouldn't even say that he would sign it, and now has come out saying, you know what, I'm just gonna do an executive order. And guess what's gonna happen? He's gonna sign that executive order, and he's gonna come out and he's gonna say, finally, I stopped the Democrats and their plan and their policy of separating kids at the border. Those Democrats are terrible. I am fantastic. Who's politicizing the children? Look, here's the thing. The entire point of this, and this is Stephen Miller, right? Stephen Miller, inside the Trump administration, said, hey, you want the wall? Take the children hostage. Trust me, it'll work. Who's politicizing the children? Now, finally, back to Lewandowski. He said that, he was asked whether he was making fun of the child with Down syndrome. He said, quote, I don't know the young girl that Zach referenced. That's Zach Pekanis. That's the guy saying, how dare you, sir? Which I'd have been like, fuck off, Lewandowski. Go ahead and kick me off CNN. But I'm going to tell you to your face that you're a goddamn monster. But anyway, he said, I was mocking Zach, a liberal Democratic National Committee activist who was doing nothing but politicizing the issue by making an example of one particular child. Now he continues. He says, by the way, he's going to continue from that thought of how dare you bring up one child to politicize the issue. Then he's going to go and he's going to bring up a couple of other examples to politicize immigration. He says, if we're going to talk about children and illegal immigration, let's talk about Kate Steinle and Jamil Shaw, who were permanently separated from their families because they were killed by illegal immigrants. Let's talk about Brian Terry and his family, the border agent who was killed, a police officer killed on the border, and whose son was shot in the face in a stoop in California by an illegal immigrant, and Kate Steinle. How dare you bring up one example and try to politicize it? I'm going to go now bring up a bunch of my examples and politicize it. Fair is fair, I guess. Look, they have no empathy. And look, I just figured something out. There's a saying over in the right, and you probably heard it. We've all heard it. Liberalism. It's a mental disorder. I actually finally know what they mean by that. To them, empathy for fellow human beings who don't look like you, that's what they consider the mental disorder. Liberals, with all their empathy, with all this feeling about, having feelings about other people and caring about other people who are even not American? You got a mental disorder, man. You are mental. How can you care about other people who don't look like you? They're not one of us. For all you know, they could be coming to kill you and your kids or take your job. You have a mental disorder, liberal. That's it, though. Having compassion and empathy for other human beings, people who are not Americans, that is mental. And look, it doesn't just extend to non-Americans. It also extends to African Americans, minorities. Anybody who's not white and Christian and conservative, we don't have any empathy for. Sorry. If you don't fall into any of those things, chances are they don't care if you live or die, or get trafficked or raped or beaten or don't, die from lack of health care. They don't care because they don't have empathy. That is what is lacking in the modern conservative movement. They say, no, conservatives, we have facts, not feelings. Well, one of the feelings that they don't have is empathy. And this is a perfect example of that in action. Okay. Moving on. Let's see. We are not done with the immigrant's story. Let's go to Stephen Miller. Now, there has been a lot of blowback over Trump's policy of separating families at the border. And prior to the administration's decision to do an executive order to walk back that policy, the West Wing was obviously in a bit of chaos. Of course, when is it not? Now, of according to a new report from Vanity Fair, Gabriel Sherman reporting here, he said that Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders had been dodging her responsibility to do press briefings because of this policy. Now, it turns out that Sarah Huckabee Sanders, behind the scenes, does not support this policy. So she's like, I don't want to defend this anymore. I'm tired of defending this. In fact, here's a source talking to Vanity Fair. She says she's tired of taking on water for something she doesn't believe in. Well, that makes sense. Now, they also said she continues to have a frustration that the policies are all over the map. It is not a good look for Sarah. So, are we looking at a Sarah exit? A Srexit? Yeah, that's terrible. I'll have to come up with something else. But Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she could be gone. Now, look, it's not outside the realm of possibility, because according to sources, if Sanders were to leave earlier than expected, because there is talk about that apparently now, Trump, they say, is high on former Fox and Friends anchor Heather Nauert, who is currently in the State Department as their spokesperson to be his next press secretary. One former administration official said, quote, Trump loves her. Well, uh-oh. Now, that's Sarah Huckabee Sanders, obviously not in favor of this. But what about the other side? I said there was a division, that there's some chaos. Well, the other side is Stephen Miller. Now, Stephen Miller is said to have been taking joy in seeing the photos of crying children, and also apparently loves the outrage among liberals and more traditional conservatives. In fact, a Trump advisor told Vanity Fair, quote, Stephen actually enjoys seeing those pictures at the border. He's a twisted guy. The way he was raised and picked on, there's always been a way he's gone about this. He is Waffen SS. Ooh. For those of you not familiar, SS, of course, is a throwback to Nazi Germany. Now, Miller looks like he's one of those, could pass for it. It looks like he cosplays Nazis in his backyard with his friends. Creepy. Now, Miller is the guy that convinced Trump to enact this policy. It wasn't the Democrats. It was actually Miller. The guy's a sociopath. I mean, only somebody who's completely demented and void of all empathy can say, hey, look, I got a great idea. Let's separate the kids from their families at the border, so then later on I can masturbate all over the pictures of crying immigrant children. Oh, it's so hot. He's a sick person. Now, as for Trump, he was only doing this because Stephen's like, well, you can get your wall. You hold the children hostage, and then you can get the Democrats to do their wall if you blame them. In fact, according to the piece in Vanity Fair, quote, Trump doesn't like this policy, and he knows it's not helping him, said a source who spoke to Vanity Fair on the subject. He said, quote, but he can't get within him that this is a problem, and he needs to take ownership of it. Well, as I mentioned earlier, he actually is taking ownership of it now, sort of, by saying, okay, I'm going to do an executive order. I'm going to reverse this policy that we enacted. Although he won't admit it, he'll still probably come out and say, I saved the children from the Democrats' terrible policy. Trump is great. We all know that's coming. But look, he blamed the Democrats. It's their fault. They're not doing anything about it. Well, actually, as soon as this began, Feinstein, who's somebody that I'm not in favor of on the Democratic side, immediately released a piece of legislation that would have ended the practice. Very, very few Republicans were interested in that. It's because their voters overwhelmingly loved this policy and instead had their own plan that was actually more draconian than what we're already doing. And, of course, he wasn't very interested in signing any Democratic bill that doesn't have funding for the wall because that was Trump's plan is, I want to get the wall. But, of course, it's the Democrats' fault. Yeah. Look, this is all political. It's blown up in his face. And now he knows. He's like, okay, bad move. But I can still spin this to where I come out on top. But anybody who's paying attention knows that this was a big political gamble that completely failed. And that's, look, you don't play politics with kids. You just don't. And hopefully the Trump administration has started to learn that. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a quick break. Let's see. Come back. We got a story on that was suggested to me yesterday through the super chat. This was immigrant children being drugged. Lovely. So stay right here. We'll come right back. Around the Nation. If you want, send those super chats. If not, please like and share the stream, and we'll come back. We'll do more stories. Around the Nation. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation, right here, TWT Nation. let's dive into the story. Before I do, I want to thank Platify for the super chat. Didn't actually say anything, but hey, thank you. I appreciate the assistance. Okay, so now let's move on. We got a story, I believe from Mark yesterday, about immigrant children being drugged in U.S. detention. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. So recently, a lot of attention has been paid to immigrant children who are being detained by the U.S. government. Now, the Trump administration had made it a policy to separate families at the border. However, there were immigrant children being held by the United States for longer than just recently. In fact, during the time where there were a lot of unaccompanied children, about 10,000 were being held in custody by the United States. These are unaccompanied minors, the children who came without their parents. So, now, of course, where are you going to put all these children? Well, there are many different places. One of them is actually being sued by parents of these children, caretakers, on allegations that these children, while in custody, were drugged repeatedly. Now, in a new lawsuit, immigrant children detained at a government facility in Texas described being forcibly drugged with psychotropic medicines that made them dizzy and unable to walk. Now, Reveal reported on Wednesday that minors held at the Shiloh Treatment Center in Mountville, Texas, described in its Google Plus listing as a, quote, baby gulag, were physically abused and given shots of powerful psychiatric medications that render them unable to walk, afraid of people, and wanting to sleep constantly. Well, if anything sounds like abuse, it is that. Holy hell. Now, in the affidavits, the children and their parents said workers at the facility told them that they would not be allowed to leave or see their parents if they didn't take their medicine, which was administered via shots. The children were also allegedly told that these shots were vitamins. That is incredibly dystopian. I mean, look, it just reminds me of the similar policy of, hey, you're not going to get to see your parents until you get a bath, until you get a shower. Now, that was used in Nazi Germany to herd people off into the gas chambers. Now, the Trump administration, I'm not saying that they were doing that, okay? Not even close. But this, oh, no, take your medicine, take your vitamins, or else you're not going to see your parents. That is gross and horrific. Now, the supervisor, according to one girl, said I was going to get a medication injection to calm me down. Then, two staff grabbed me and the doctor gave me the injection despite my objection and left me there on the bed. According to another mother, her child fell repeatedly, hitting her head and ended up in a wheelchair. Another described physical abuse, trying to open a window and then being hurled against a door by a Shiloh supervisor, who then choked her until she fainted. So that's just one of the allegations of physical abuse, and among many, and of course, being given drugs. Now, get a load of the drugs that they gave these kids. One child, according to the report, was prescribed 10 different shots and pills, including an antipsychotic, which included Latuda, Geodon, and olanzapine, the Parkinson's medication, benzotropin, the seizure medications, clonazepam, and divalproex. Sorry, I can't really say these very well. Maybe there's a rule, like if you can't say it, you shouldn't inject it into immigrant kids. The nerve pain medication and antidepressant, duloxetine, and the cognition enhancer, guanfacine. So why would one child need that many different medications? I mean, holy hell. This is pure abuse. Now, getting into the details of the lawsuit, Hundreds of pages of medical records were filed in the U.S. District Court in California back in April. They were filed as part of an ongoing class action lawsuit against the government that alleged mistreatment of immigrant children in U.S. custody. Now, forensic psychiatrist Mark Mills assessed the records at Reveal's request and found that Shiloh orderlies were given an unusually wide berth with dosage recommendations for the children in their care. Maribel Hernandez, a Honduran asylum seeker whose son was held at Shiloh after being referred for psychological issues at another facility, told Reveal that her caseworker sent her a video of the boy in which he appeared completely hypnotized and lethargic. She said she repeatedly objected to the medication and had never signed consent forms for that treatment. So, again, a lot of this seems like abuse towards the most vulnerable. Again, these are undocumented immigrants. They don't have rights. They don't have any way to go and fight against this. They have no way of escape. What are they going to do? It's disastrous. They should immediately have their license pulled if this turns out to be true. Now, Shiloh also, what makes it worse is Shiloh also received $19 million in federal funding after repeated allegations of abuse at the facility. So they already knew that there was something going on, and yet, no, we're still going to give you federal funding. Now, another Houston Chronicle investigation revealed allegations of physical violence, unreasonable and excessive use of physical restraints, administering emergency medications without notice of governmental authorities, and several deaths of minor children when they were in custody. Look, this is obviously hugely problematic. It seems like there is absolutely no oversight, and yet they're getting federal funding in order to drug kids. No, this is sick. This is sick. We need to end this practice. We need to shut down this company if this is true, and get these kids out of there immediately. Okay. So let's move on from immigration to Democratic fuckery. So since the repeal of net neutrality rules by Ajit Pai, there have been a lot of states that have been trying to do their own net neutrality rules. Now, California actually had a pretty good chance of being able to have some of the strongest net neutrality protections in the country. However, corporate Democrats have put a stop to it. Gizmodo explains. 2 California state lawmakers had struck a deal on Monday to combine 2 net neutrality bills introduced separately this year, SB 822, which is incredibly strong, and SB 460. Now, both of those, which have cleared the state Senate, working in tandem, would have ensured that Californians that had the same level of protection against net neutrality violators that was ensured under the 2015 Open Internet Order, which established the federal net neutrality rules. Now, instead of accepting amendments, however, to combine 822 and 460 into one bill that would have been incredibly strong, the strongest net neutrality bill in the country, something that could have been a model for the rest of the United States, Assemblyman Miguel Santiago, chair of the Communications and Conveyance Committee, decided not to do that and decided to propose his own amendments. Now, those amendments would not add to the strength of this bill. Those amendments are taking away from the strength of this bill and watering it down. Now, Santiago, the source said, had intended to substantially diminish the end legislation's effectiveness, leaving enormous loopholes for internet service providers such as AT&T and Comcast to exploit. Now, it's important to note that he's doing this in favor of AT&T, and I'm going to, of course, show you why later on. Now, the plan to unify the two bills had been originally announced on Monday by Senators Scott Weiner and Kevin DeLeon. Now, the authors of SB 822 and 460, respectively. De Leon, of course, is in favor of the weaker 460, and Weiner actually is author of 822, which is a strong net neutrality bill. Now, I'm going to explain why that's strong, but first, they got some interesting establishment support from Nancy Pelosi. Now, in a letter, Pelosi wrote to Santiago, "We will not settle for the weak bills pushed by the Republicans that eliminate crucial consumer protections and our net neutrality in name only." So basically what she was saying is, Santiago, don't fuck this up. Net neutrality is important, and I'm actually on the side of net neutrality. Well, that's interesting. Again, that's not something I would expect from Nancy Pelosi, so good on her for that. Santiago, however, was unmoved. Now, there was one thing about that letter, by the way, that did bother me, in that Santiago is not a Republican. He's not pushing a Republican bill. He's a Democrat, and he decided, I'm going to go against progressives, and I'm going to weaken this legislation that could have been very, very strong. But, of course, he's a corporate Democrat, and one that takes a lot of money from the industry. And the industry, thanks to this, is now celebrating. Gizmodo explains that the telecom industry had worked hard to disrupt the passage of California's net neutrality legislation, in particular SB 822. Now, that bill mirrors not only the handful of pages that make up the underlying rules of the 2015 Open Internet Order, but 300 pages worth of explanations contained in the order itself. Now, while the rules alone would prohibit ISPs from blocking and throttling internet traffic or creating so-called fast and slow lanes, the full order explains at length the reasons the rules exist and how they should be applied, codifying a number of protections that aren't explicitly laid out in the rule's simple text. So those 300 pages of explanations, that's also included in 822, and that would have made it incredibly strong. Now, the bill authored by De Leon, who is a corporate Democrat, of course, SB 460 did not include these additional protections. However, if combined with 822, would have been the strongest net neutrality bill in the entire United States. Now, that is why they don't want this to happen, and that's why they paid Santiago so much money to sabotage it. According to sources, Santiago broke regular order and had the bill amended and severely weakened before Senator Weiner could even present his side. Senator Weiner, of course, is reportedly livid about this, while AT&T lobbyists were heard celebrating in the hallway. So that's to show you exactly why Santiago had done it. And if that's not clear enough, here's what Santiago also got in return. According to finance records, major ISPs have contributed to Santiago more than $29,000 during this election cycle alone, including $7,800 from AT&T and its affiliates. This is why this happened. Look, anybody who looks at California and says that is a progressive bastion, they're wrong. They're the establishment bastion. Yes, they are more liberal than a lot of the country because a lot of the country is incredibly backwards. And that is because, of course, Democrats have pretty much abandoned the rest of the country other than New York and LA. Now, I see a lot of people that are getting, really, really, I guess, frustrated, understandably, and really disheartened because of the recent losses in places like California. The California primary was incredibly devastating to the progressive movement. To some people, that makes them think, well, it's not worth it. We're never going to win. I mean, if we can't win in progressive California, where can we win? Well, the answer to that is everywhere else. I've noticed in a lot of places where Democrats have basically left it alone. The establishment has left it alone. And the Republicans have taken over. There is an appetite for progressive policy, and progressives can actually win. Our revolution has a win rate of near 50% in their endorsements, and they're barely even a couple years old. That right there shows you that progressives can win. It's much harder to win in places like California. They're, for number one, are incredibly expensive to run in. And number two, that is the establishment stronghold. It's also difficult to win in Chicago, which is also another Democratic establishment stronghold. New York is the same way. And yet there are wins in New York as well. And I've covered those. Christine Pellegrino, for example, is a great example. She won in a district where Donald Trump had actually done really, really well. So it's a great example of both. She both won in New York and in a Trump district. The future of progressivism is not in California, in New York. The people living there are actually fairly comfortable. They don't have the same kind of hunger for change, revolution, political revolution, as they do in places where the Democrats have left them behind. The future of progressivism is not in California. The future of progressivism is all the places that the Democrats have left alone. Now, so how that relates, of course, to net neutrality is, look, if progressives can win in these places that have been left alone, then we can draft new pieces of legislation that are better than what California has failed to pass. And I think that is the future of the movement, and that's what we should be doing. We should be fighting in all the other places where the Democrats do not have control and they do not have centralized power. And I think that's the only place that we can win, because that's where the money is not. So just take heart, progressives. This is a disastrous loss for, progressive policy. Which could have been something that the nation could follow, but the fight is not over. It can happen in other places. We just have to keep fighting to get net neutrality and progressive policies back. Never stop fighting. Okay. Okay. Moving on. Now, The Intercept out with another great article from Li Fong, who is talking about a prominent New York Democrat taking money from Republicans. Now, The Intercept explains. Faced with a surprisingly strong challenge from progressive first-time candidate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York's Democratic primary, Crowley, the fourth-ranking House Democrat, is slated to appear at the offices of BGR Group in Washington, D.C., for a fundraising reception, according to an invitation obtained by The Intercept. Now, that invitation lists Crowley's position in leadership of the Democratic Party and as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, which oversees important tax policy. Now, the fundraiser, which asks for $500 minimum to attend as an individual or $1,000 to attend as if you're part of a political action committee, is sort of weird. As Fong points out on this, because he's a Democrat. He's a Democrat. He's supposed to be an opponent of the Republican Party. He's supposed to resist, right? Well, BGR, all of its founding partners were Republicans. Now, it's actually named after that. It's baked into the name. BGR stands for Haley Barbour, Ed Rogers, and Lanny Griffith. Now, Haley Barbour, of course, is a former RNC chairman. Ed Rogers is a former aide to President Ronald Reagan, and Griffith is a former education official in the George H.W. Bush administration. Now, the firm also, while being made up of Republicans, has a huge Republican list of clients. BGR Group represents defense contractor Raytheon, Huntington Ingalls, and United Technologies on procurement. So, look, Republicans, defense contractors, and pharmaceutical companies. which include Eli Lilly and company, retain BGR Group explicitly to stave off the threat of lowering drug prices, according to lobbying disclosures. Cardinal Health, which is facing lawsuits across the country for its role in fueling the opioid epidemic by supplying known pill mill pharmacies, hired BGR Group on pending legislation to deal with pharmaceutical product distribution. Other firms that are facing increasing scrutiny include Amazon, Verizon, and Chevron. Those are also BGR Group clients. Now, that's not the only problematic clients. BGR Group also boasts a roster of foreign clients. They represent Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia right now is at war with Yemen. Is a massive human rights crisis going on in Yemen. There's a famine thanks to the war, and we are supplying Saudi Arabia with missiles. Wonderful. Now, not only that, but there's a little bit of a Russian connection as well. In case you're not concerned, establishment Democrats. BGR represents two companies controlled by Russian billionaire Mikhail Fridman. That is Alpha Bank and Letter One Holdings. Now, right now, the Alpha Bank is being scrutinized for suspicious communications between the Trump organization and their computer servers during the presidential campaign. What happened is this weird server out in the middle of nowhere kept pinging the Trump Tower for some weird reason, and we haven't figured out why. Now, look, the firm, as I said before, it is a partisan outlet, but they have been hiring Democrats to expand its bipartisan outreach on behalf of the clients. Now, Jonathan Mance, for example, is one of the hosts of the Crowley event and is a BGR Group lobbyist involved in Democratic politics. Nonetheless, they are still very outspoken within the GOP. For example, one BGR Group chair pens a regular column for the Washington Post. Now, in a column last month, he scorned Democrats for capitulating to the shallow-minded embrace of socialism embodied by progressives such as Senator Bernie Sanders. Well, then I guess Crowley fits right in, because Crowley is as establishment as you can get. Now, of course, if you talk to him or if you ask him that, he'll be like, no, I'm a progressive. I'm a great progressive. I believe in great progressive ideals. Okay, for example, what? Protecting the ACA, and Trump is bad. You know what? Trump is terrible. He's so bad. Which is funny, because as I said, he's going to a fundraiser at BGR. And of course, the Trump administration and BGR are actually very friendly and have friendly relations. Now, the firm's lobbyists, for example, were invited to some of the first transition meetings after the election. Now, we know that much of Wall Street and much of the lobbyists and business interests bet on Hillary Clinton. However, BGR was different. BGR actually bet on President Trump. They donated directly to Donald Trump's campaign. Interesting. So these ties keep on. Why would you go as a Democratic senator to raise money from BGR, from a group that is tied, that is donated to President Trump? But look, that's what Crowley does. Crowley doesn't care where his money comes from, because Crowley is what we call a bagman. He goes and he gets all the money and he gives it to other Democrats. In fact, The Intercept reported previously, Crowley's rise within the Democratic Party ranks is tied to his ability to raise large sums of money from corporate lobbyists and political action committees. Now, because of his fundraising prowess, he won endorsements from both local and national Democrats with a history of getting money from Crowley-controlled PACs. He is the money man. He's all about raising more money. He doesn't care where he gets it from. And the only reason that he's got a powerful position is because he gives that money out to other campaigns. He hasn't done anything progressive. He's not a progressive. He is a corporate Democrat. And again, he's a hypocrite. Because while he calls out Trump, says, oh, Trump is so terrible, he's taking the same money that he's getting donations from the same places that give donations to President Trump and gave it during their campaigns. So, look, that's resistance here on the Democratic side, unfortunately. Now, look, recently I watched a debate between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Crowley. And, look, you could see what he was about during that debate. She talked about substantive issues. She talked about the need for tuition-free public education. She talked about the need for Medicare for all. And he talked about the need to just resist Trump. Well, how are you resisting Trump if you're taking money from the same people that give Trump money? As usual, this is another corporate Democrat that will keep taking money from the right wing while claiming to oppose them. There is no change with these people in the Democratic Party. What they are is, again, they're hypocrites. They don't care about progressive policy, and this is why they need to get voted out. So New York, you have a chance to elect a true progressive, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Do so. And of course, I'm going to put a way to donate to her campaign in the description of this video. So, and don't forget, get out there, support her campaign, and vote, most importantly, so we can get these corporate Democrats out. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. And I appreciate the likes and shares. That helps out a lot. So that's the show. We'll come back tomorrow. We got a great show. We'll have a great show lined for you tomorrow. So lined up. So we'll see you. We'll see you then, 3 p.m. Eastern, right here, TYT Nation. Thanks everybody. Love you guys, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you all tomorrow. You have an awesome day.